Maurice is smiling. He may be a little embarrassed because we all know how modest Mo is, but he is smiling. So, welcome to all of you. A special welcome to Danny Ostroff, who's somewhere in the audience here, the son of Maurice. A welcome to our esteemed panelists, Professor Erwin Kotler, Dan Dijker, Steve Lindy, and Ben Dror Yamini. You'll hear more about them in detail later. A special welcome as well to all the various organizations that are represented here tonight, their leadership, the members of these organizations. I'm not going to name any because I'll be in trouble, I'll forget some, so that shall remain nameless. But I reserve the special welcome for the man of the moment, and that is Maurice Ostroff himself. Because Maurice is here tonight. He's here within every one of you. He came here tonight with every one of you. He's in your thoughts. He's in the recollections of all the achievements that he's done. So tonight, Maurice is with us. You know, when General Douglas MacArthur in 1951 addressed the two houses of Congress, he made a comment which is bandied about that old soldiers never die, they fade away. They don't with Maurice. Maurice never faded away. Maurice died with his boots on. And I feel compelled, as a South African standing up before you here, not to let the night go without mentioning another Machal comrade who died about a couple of weeks before Maurice, called Migdal Tepperson. Migdal and Maurice were both soldiers who really passed on with their boots on. With Migdal, what was special about Migdal, he participated in every single war from 1948 right until the end. And when he couldn't go into actual combat, they used him to schlep things to the borders for the boys in trucks. That was Migdal. And Migdal's war was more of a man in the trenches, while Maurice was more of, the battle landscape was more of a cerebral nature. So when Maurice came here in 1948, and I mean, he tells the story how he came in Haifa and he was met by the British officer, because it was just prior to declaration of the War of Independence, and the British officer asked him, "What are you doing here?" Because they came in as tourists. He said, "Just passing through." Maurice already had a way with words. But he commandeered a radar unit near the Weizmann Institute, which he made from small parts and bicycle parts, and we'll hear more about that from Smokey Simon a little later, tapping in to what the enemy were doing, their movements. And that was something that never changed, because if you fast forward to the last 10, 15 years that Maurice was here at Beit Protea, his ops room was no longer at near Rehovot or the Weizmann Institute. It was on the 5th floor, 5 floors above where we are standing now. And from his overworked computer, he was tapping into what the reporters were saying, the politicians were saying, the jurists were saying, remember Goldstone, or we've forgotten about him, and many others, and responding. But the way Maurice did it, he responded respectfully. That was Maurice. And when I say that Maurice, right till the very end, Maurice passed away on a Monday. On the Thursday preceding that Monday, we had a TVT meeting in the boardroom here at Beit Protea. And we all wanted Maurice to come, of course. And Maurice was quite determined to come, but he was in CUD and he wasn't coming. So in the morning he asked Dave, "Do me a favor, connect me with Skype, and in that way I'll participate in the meeting." Well, at 5 to 2, when the meeting was starting at 2, I was hassling there with the Skype and everything. People said to me, "Dave, forget it. Let Maurice sleep." I was very reluctant, but you know, you take counsel, and so I was duly advised, and so we didn't connect him and we let him sleep. But they said, phone him in the evening. So that night I phoned him, got through to CUD, and I said, "Maurice, how are you?" And he said, "Forget about how I am. How was the meeting?" And that was Maurice. He wasn't interested in talking about his condition. He wanted to talk about the issues, about Tachlis. And I spent the next 10 minutes telling him who said what and the things we were going to do. Little did I know, then on that Monday he would pass away. You know, when the call came in that Maurice had passed away, my immediate reaction was, we have been robbed. And we had been robbed. But not entirely, because he has left us with a legacy and a methodology in which to embrace the future. And I hope that, you know, that Maurice, from his celestial perch, is looking down on what we lawyers call a holding brief, watching over us and keeping track, and that we're looking up to him. And in conclusion about Maurice still being with us and having a holding brief, I just want to mention a quote that really resonates with me, which I heard quite recently at a conference at the IDC, which does not come from the Talmud, but comes from Indian American folklore, which said, we inherit the land not from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And that gives us the obligation to go forward for the future, because we got to look forward for the generations that are coming ahead. And that's what Maurice was doing right till his last breath. Because what we have to work for in the end, to quote again Abba Eban, our greatest diplomat, who said, Israel's future will be longer than its past. Thank you.
Good evening. The Midrash in Kohelet Rabbah presents a special perspective on a person's name. It tells us that every person has three names: the one given to him by his father and mother, the one people know him by, and the one he acquires for himself. The Midrash concludes that the most important of the three names is the one that a person acquires for himself. Maurice certainly acquired a most wonderful name for himself. He endeared himself to all who were privileged to know him. Maurice was a founder member of Truth Be Told. He was a tireless blogger who devoted the latter years of his life to defending Israel and doing his share and more to enhance Israel's public image. Maurice was a true gentleman. He was totally dedicated to the upholding of human rights, and his actions were motivated by honesty, decency, and sincerity. Maurice's dedication to public diplomacy on behalf of Israel served as an example to all of us. His articles were always thoroughly researched, his arguments and points of view were always well articulated, his style of writing was authoritative and convincing, and he was never in any way condescending. Maurice believed in dialogue. He believed in his ability to convince those he engaged with. His strength of conviction in the justice of his Zionist aspirations enabled this. Maurice was totally committed to making this world a better place in which to live. It gives me great pleasure tonight to invite tributes to Maurice from people who were associated with him in different organizations during the course of his life. Professor Gerald Steinberg of NGO Monitor has conveyed his apologies for not being present this evening due to a conflicting personal commitment. Professor Steinberg has, however, submitted a written tribute which I will read to you. I had the honor, writes Professor Steinberg, of knowing and the privilege of working with Maurice for the past 15 years. While I knew of his accomplishments and his contributions to Israel in his early years, including the fight for Jewish independence in 1948 and his Aliyah from South Africa in 1980, it was after his supposed retirement that I began to appreciate his passion and tireless work. In the year 2000, when Arafat launched his terror campaign, along with a global political war to demonize Israel, Maurice was one of the few people who recognized and understood the dangers. In responding to the deadly political war that tries to prevent Israel from defending its citizens through false allegations of war crimes and the often weak responses of Israeli officials, Maurice always presented the case clearly and convincingly. He worked long hours and never seemed to rest. Almost every week, and sometimes for a number of days in succession, I would receive one of his columns or letters as they appeared in the Jerusalem Post, the Times of Israel, and elsewhere. I saved hundreds of his articles over the years as references, and now as a remembrance. In those years, as began to develop what turned into NGO Monitor, Maurice was a steady and supportive colleague and ally, offering advice, helping to gain visibility, and providing information. We consulted frequently. I valued his experience and insight. I was always happy to see NGO Monitor's research quoted in his articles. Maurice played an important role in the process of networking and coordinating. Unlike some others, he had no ego to assuage, and he was quick to compliment others while modestly minimizing his central role. He put together a very important index of all the significant reports from the different organizations exposing the war crimes lies during the 2014 Gaza war, updating the database constantly. This was extremely useful in countering and eventually neutralizing the allegations in the UN Human Rights Council publication. His involvement in Truth Be Told was yet another important contribution and a model of what Israelis sometimes deride as Hasbara, but what Maurice knew to be very important political warfare and the vital need to lead the counterattack against these lies. A while back, I joined him and others in Herzliya here at Beit Protea, where he listened to the very moving report from a group of Ethiopian students from the IDC, who, in coordination with TBT, traveled to South Africa to expose the lies of the Israel apartheid libel. It is indeed fitting that TBT be Maurice's final legacy. His name and his contributions will long be remembered and appreciated. He will also be sorely missed. I'm now honored to call on retired acting judge of the High Court in South Africa, Henry Shakanowski, to pay tribute to Maurice. Henry and Maurice were close friends. Henry serves as a member of Beit Protea, the body charged with overseeing the administration and approving the annual reports of Beit Protea. Henry and Maurice were also amongst the founders of Unity and Diversity, an organization created to engage in rational discussion with groups holding conflicting views on vital aspects affecting our life in Israel. Henry and Maurice were founder members of TBT.